Hi everyone, Tea Drinker here, and today I'm reacting to Black Sails Season 4, Episode 3. Oh, the music's starting already. Love the way they blended that in the editing. The sound editing for this show is absolutely fantastic, forgot to say that as well. I have experience doing it, like, they were knocking it out of the park. The entire series, let alone the season. Who are these people to you?
The time calls for dark men to do dark things.
Oh, that's not good.
Do not be afraid to lead them to it.
Yeah, that's not good. That does not make me feel good at all.
I'm told these soldiers that were to comprise your escort are otherwise needed ashore.
As a result of what happened with Max, I wonder. Or as a result of the fight that we'd seen. Oh, well, here's Max, so... Is she still with that girl, I wonder?
Get dressed.
Great use of the mirror there, as an extra frame.
If anything, they are now aggravated to an intolerable degree.
Yeah, it's ramping up. It's ramping up. I don't feel good for Max.
When the governor returns, he will not stop.
The governor is not here. I am here.
Yeah.
Perhaps your death might still be averted.
Max doesn't seem scared enough.
We have
I wonder what she's planning.
The island.
And as long as that is true, our alliance with them holds.
They'd be screwed if not for Maddie.
The Empire survives in part because we believe its survival to be inevitable, but it isn't, and they know that. That's why they're so terrified of you and I imagine people are going to notice.
Too much sanity may be madness. The maddest of all, to see life as it is and not as it should be.
Wow, that's a good quote. Oh my god. Common Black Sails W with the writing.
Sure. Good.
Oh, those two. I knew they'd get on. Interesting camera work.
Under instructions from Captain Beringer to locate and arrest Long John Silver.
Oh my god, this season is incredible. All these threads coming together.
Such that I might
Give me
continue
the
to
names.
serve his regime
Give
in the
me
future
the
as I
names.
have served
Oh,
him
Max.
this day until
Give
now.
me the names!
Oh, I think she's gonna die this season.
How would you do it?
With great difficulty, I imagine.
How would you take NASA?
Oh. Oh, shit. You're joking me. Back from the dead? Well, it takes one to know one. Whoa. Okay. Why are we lingering on him? Holy... What's Jack gonna do? What can Jack do? Oh, Anne. Let's hope it's the right decision, Jack.
He's the most influential member of the governor's
Oh my
council.
god.
He relies upon...
And by the time you realize he has been controlling you, it is going to be too late.
A very prophetic line from Max there.
No one at all!
He's a great actor. Really, really strong. Not over the top when he's even doing something like this, he's keeping it in. He's doing a great job. That's a very difficult role to play because the character himself is naturally, you know, kind of up there. So to be able to deliver that in a way that appears realistic, or at least adhering to a degree of realism established by the show, is very, very difficult to do. So kudos to him.
This one, however.
What's gonna happen here? Oh, has he seen her? Oh, oh, Maddie.
All that remains to do is for him to return.
Power of Long John Silver.
Help if Nasa knew I was coming.
I'm asking you to cancel the theatre around...
Yes, exactly. This is going to literally just achieve animosity and nothing else.
there is a better way to solve this problem.
Oh, very interesting, Elle. I'm very curious as to how accurate the information Max gave Elle actually was. I mean, I don't think Max would double-cross Elle in the situation, but with where Max's head is, it's a little bit difficult to know exactly what she's thinking. And what is going to be the fallout of Jack raising the white? Where is this going? Oh, the look they're about to share one another.
Protected me when we were young.
Is Teach gonna die this episode?
Failed when we were older.
Is Teach gonna die and then Jack has to live with the emotional fallout?
And I moved to his first mate,
What a terrifying monologue.
the gun captains.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time we reached Acapulco, there was only one.
And that's the stuff he left out of his book.
The one I delivered alive to recount the tale.
Rogers is a great character. God, what the hell is going through Jack's head right now? This is terrifying. Oh God. Oh no, 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 please don't do that. Oh God. Oh. This is disgusting. Is he still alive? Oh God, if he's alive, that's so much worse. Oh. Oh. Oh, Jesus. Oh. Oh, that's sick. I usually have a strong stomach for violence, but this is different. Oh my God, they're actually showing it to us. Oh God, the implication was bad enough. Holy shit. For Jack to have this type of guilt, of all people. Oh God, please just let him be dead. Please just let him be dead. This is disgusting. This is so much worse than anything in Game of Thrones. Oh, dude. Oh, it's been a while since I've had to watch anything this difficult. This is so disgusting. Please let him be dead. The lips torn away. Oh my God. Oh, what could even be said after that? Oh, great! Great! Thanks for giving us more violence. Dude, this episode was rough. I mean, this was really a slow burn with the violence in this show. When they deliver, they really deliver. Yeah, that was incredibly hard to watch, but it didn't feel edgy. It felt necessary for a type of show that this is. It was good that they showed their relationship earlier on during the episode. Did he even see her in his periphery, I wonder? Oh, that was a great shot. Because then we're left wondering whether or not he did see her in his periphery. Excellent, excellent, excellent. What the hell is gonna happen? Well, there you go, there's your resistance. Seeing as you were talking a big game earlier. This season is insane. The writers are on drugs. This is insane. This show is insane. And then there's 7 episodes after this one? Holy shit. No going back. Absolutely no going back now. Oh my God. And that was great, we got the setup of that at the beginning of the episode. Wow. When this show does violence, it does violence. I mean, there was just so much in the last 2 episodes. I don't know if I'm gonna go right into the 3rd, just to see the aftermath. I mean, I'm very tempted to just review these two episodes first, because there was so much. Oh my God. Man, that stuff with Teach is going to be living in my head rent-free for quite some time. So that's it. That's the reaction, and yeah, I guess here's the review. Here's the review coming up now. So our opening scene with Berenger and Rogers, I mean, a quote like that, Eleanor doesn't need to know what it is that's going to lie ahead. Of course, it's very prophetic for what's going to happen in the rest of the episode, and even if you haven't seen any other episode past this point, you know, quotes like that, they do tend to foreshadow a lot of the upcoming danger for the succeeding season. But in and of itself, just looking at it from a storytelling point of view, from a plot point of view, in this episode just in and of itself, for that to be the introductory scene, we do get a great sense of tension and stakes, particularly with the scene opening with Berenger looking at the locket in his hand with his wife and child, which, irrespective of one knowing what's going to happen to Berenger in the rest of the episode, it still creates a tangible sense of these are men who have human wants and desires just like us, and because of that they have human fears and apprehensions the same as us. So for as much as a lot of the conversations in the previous episode would have dealt with civilization and good and wrong and reputation, all these quite abstractions, a conversation such as this, even though it's still built on an abstract, it is built on a what if, it brings us back and it kind of keeps things grounded back to our primal fears. So then, as the scene continues, we have Berenger continuing on. He's referring to Roger's men, saying that these are not good men. In fact, these are men who have become consumed by darkness, which is so interesting because, you know, in all this time, when we talk about England, of course, the evilness of England has not been kept a secret by Black Sails by any stretch, but we've seen that from the higher ups. We haven't really seen the actual men themselves being referred to. It would be a little bit contrived at this point in the story to try and give us like the perspective of one of the redcoats and then we see him dying. The show wouldn't do something like that. It would be too disjointed. So instead, to have Berenger himself note on the nature and the mentality of these men themselves, from a plot perspective, it delivers great setup that Berenger and Rogers are going to be formidable forces for this episode. But from a thematic storytelling point of view, it really does hammer home the idea that all these men on either side of the fight have been so consumed by this sort of malevolence towards other people. We got a great scene there with Hudson and Eleanor speaking to one another. We're getting more and more of Hudson as the episodes progress, which I think is really nice. Given the fact that we saw her being forced to essentially spy on Rogers for the Spanish, and now seeing that the real toll that has paid upon her, that her desire to be reunited with her family once more, from a storytelling point of view, like from a world building point of view, it's great to see stuff like that because we see the true ramifications that this war has on people who, by no fault of their own, have ended up having to fight certain battles that they had no desire to fight in the first place, and take sides that they had no desire to take to begin with. And again, I do truly love that actor. I found out yesterday that she is the wife of Toby Stevens, Flint. So, you know, now when I see her on screen during these rewatches, it's really nice to see. And again, that small little interaction also serves as a great setup for what is going to happen with the remainder of the episode with regards to how successful Eleanor's plans are going to be, and of course then having the man come on, having the man then board the ship just at the tail end of the scene, talking about how their permission to sail has been blocked. It's a great way of establishing conflict very early on. So in our following scene with Berenger and Max, we definitely get conflict with Max, to say the least, as basically a direct result of the very last scene in the previous episode. We see that she had been followed to her meeting with Sylvie, and Berenger is not only completely aware of her deceit of her acting behind his back, he is now willing to give her the death penalty if she does not very quickly start to cooperate with his efforts to capture Sylvie, but just more importantly with him and with his leadership of Nassau. And this in and of itself creates a great external conflict for Sylvie as well. We now know that there's a ticking clock against him that he's presumably unaware of, but I mean, he hardly thought that killing 4 of her men and seeing her run away was just going to be bygones, you know what I mean? There's certainly not that level of naivete with Sylvie, for as naive as he may be at points, but nonetheless, this is a great scene in raising the stakes against Max, and as such against Sylvie as well. As well as it does really kind of further the characterization of Berenger as well, showing how relentless he is to make sure that his law is the law of Nassau, regardless of how much Max has contributed to Nassau, but also regardless of how much of a fight she is willing to put up. He is determined to basically destroy everything in his path, but more importantly, to defend himself against anything that comes towards him. There's this fantastic scene with Flint and Maddie that follows, which operates as a moment of reflection for the characters. It's addressed by Maddie at the very front of the scene that their men are going to trust Flint because Flint is the one who shares the same values as opposed to Billy and his men, who are now our enemies. Following that, we see a short little bit as they're walking. They're talking about what their upcoming plans are going to be, with Maddie taking action. But then after they have this conversation where Maddie is questioning how effective this plan is going to be and whether or not they truly do stand a chance, not just in the short term, but in the long term. They might be able to gain the throne of Nassau, but can they actually maintain it? Not necessarily with regards to the physical limits of that, but more so to do with, can we maintain this reputation? Like, who's to say that the culture that England has, the cultural footprint that England has left on Nassau isn't going to supersede any of our efforts? To which Flint very wisely said, if people are able to forget a time before England's arrival, then they'll be able to forget a time after. In other words, that for as strong as England might be, it is a castle made of sand. It is something that is going to dissipate given enough time. And Maddie ends the scene with this really, really great quote, talking about the madness of sanity itself, that the more you see reality as the way it is, the more detached from reality you become. Kind of reminds me somewhat, if you remember from the very first Harry Potter book, The Mirror of Erised, in that people will waste away in front of the mirror because they're looking for their heart's desire. They're constantly at a standstill, keeping their eye on the prize of desire, the kind of the inherent paradox of that. And I think that given the, not even necessarily the overarching theme, just purely the characterization of Flint himself, both in the entirety of season 3 and really just the beginning of the show itself, the idea of a person who will end up becoming insane as a result of them gripping to sanity to begin with. I think that quote from Maddie is profoundly deep and apt for this show. We get this great interaction between Jack and Anne. In the previous episode, of course, we had the big conversation between Jack and Teach, what I love so much. And we also got the conversation between Anne and Jack wondering where they're going to go, and talking about how killing Max would be something she's unprepared to do, just it would be a step too far for her, she wouldn't be able to live with it. So now for her to talk to Jack about where they're going to go after this, it kind of reminded me a little bit of a gambler talking about that all they need is just this one big win and then they're through gambling forever. The idea of defeating Rogers and then walking away. But I think that it makes sense for the characters to still have this inherent need to defeat Rogers, not because it's a personal vendetta, but instead because it hits, not because it's a vendetta on the behalf of Charles Vane, but rather it aligns itself with the ethos that Charles Vane himself would have aligned himself with. At least that's how they're perceiving it. And then Jack ending by saying, "This is the beginning of the end." Yeah, for a line like that to be in your third episode of the final season is very appropriate. We get this very short, really emotional scene of Maddie discovering that Sylvie is still alive. I just love how interconnected all these storylines are, that this one thing over here is going to affect this thing over here. Oh, it's just absolutely fantastic, because we got that conversation from Beringer when he instructed Max that he is going to be finding Long John Silver to apprehend him, and now for that news to have reached Maddie at this particular moment in this particular way is just really, really great to see. We get this really great interaction between Berenger and Max. First of all, just at the very front of it, we get Edel and Featherstone, who are... Featherstone more so than Edel is very worried about what the ramifications are if Max tells on them. To which Edel says that she's not going to let Max is not going to let them be pushed around. And then, sure enough, within the same scene, we get Max completely holding her own, completely standing her ground, absolutely not yielding, that she's going to wait for the governor to get back and all this would be sorted, Beringer screaming in her face. And we get great payoff for Elle being told that she can't leave yet. She storms into the room and says, "What's going on here?" So it's a great continuation of Max's plotline this episode. She's very much dealing with the conflict. She's dealing with the conflict by absolutely not backing down. She's completely digging her heels into the ground, regardless of what it is that's going to, regardless of whatever consequences may come. And again, it's great to see Beringer lose his cool in the way that he is, having that level of power taken away from him. Of course, he does still hold the power, but in the sense that, at least in this interaction before Elle comes in, he is not able to break Max in the way that he probably would be able to break most other people in her position. And then Elle comes in and he is in quite a lot of ways rendered void at that particular moment. So that was really great to see. The sequence that comes with Teach and Sylvie, I think, is a great example of how impressed I often am by the pacing of Black Sails, the decision they make, because those two scenes put together, one of Sylvie and Teach talking about how is Sylvie going to move forward with no army at his back, and then immediately being saved by Flint and two others, and Flint seeing that Sylvie is in fact still alive. I think that it's so interesting to see, because in other shows they would have really dragged that out. They would have dragged it out over maybe 2 or 3 scenes, and it wouldn't be until well past the halfway point of the episode where they would have Flint and Sylvie reunited, and they might even do like a big hug, that kind of thing. But in here, like, it's like not even 5 minutes, the entire sequence from seeing the Redcoats chase running towards the Rex in order to apprehend Sylvie, all the way up to the point of the Redcoats then being taken care of, and Sylvie and Teach now teaming up with Flint and the 2 other crewmen. It's done in such a short amount of time. I thought it was quite interesting in that regard. And of course it is great to see kind of for Sylvie, for his character, well, more so to do with the plot rather than characterization. We're giving the inciting incident of he wants to be Long John Silver, but he doesn't have an army at his back. What is he going to do? And then that brings us right into, like, pretty immediately into his second act of him just now stumbling upon Flint, and the 3 of them have now teamed up, and a man can do what a man can do. Now we're all just a big band of brothers, and that's it then for the end of the season. Thank you so much for watching. No, there's obviously so much more to come, but just having that little moment of victory in and of itself was still really, it was great to see. And again, knowing as an audience member that there's still so much of the episode left to go, it also leads you to wonder, what is it that's going to be happening next? We got a really powerful sequence after this with the action sequence in which Teach and Anne lead the vanguard against Rogers, and it all seems to be well. It seems to be a pretty straightforward affair of them fighting the fight that they needed to, and apparently winning. And then out of nowhere comes Rogers and his men who had been lurking, which is which is great characterization for Rogers, because we wouldn't have suspected him to allow his men to simply die like that in order to gain tactical advantage. But sure enough, that's what happens. And for that to happen, knowing what we had in the initial scene of Berenger describing these men as being dark men, we see, well, Rogers is definitely the darkest of them all for allowing this to happen. And then seeing that culminate in Jack having to raise to White, seeing that Anne and Teach are held at gunpoint. And of course, it's more than just sentimentality that goes without saying. It's because Jack knows that without the two of them, and indeed all the rest of the men on the ship itself, there's no way he can win this fight. So the best thing to do now is to surrender, and hopefully they will be able to leave with their lives intact to some shape or form. It's a very harrowing scene to watch, not only because we are seeing the literal loss of the external conflict, we're in the sense of we're losing the fight against Rogers, that it's an external conflict that we have been defeated by, but of course then there's the internal sense of Jack knowing that he's in a way kind of betrayed Teach by raising the White, and arguably with Charles Vane as well, although from an intellectual perspective, Jack would know that that's wrong. From an intellectual perspective, he made the best decision he could. But on an emotional and, I guess you could say, spiritual level, he is just completely defeated at this point. And that's not even getting into what's about to happen, what we are going to see later on with this episode as a direct result of Jack raising the White. So the scene with Max and Elle that's preceded with Elle speaking to Berenger, and we realise how steadfast he is and how he, in much more diplomatic terms, with Elle than he was speaking with Max, he makes it clear that he understands the relationship that Max has with the governor, but law does have to be enforced, and he does have to be the one to do it. And unless he has valuable reasoning for trusting Max, I guess, for lack of a better term, like, his hands are tied and he can't do anything else in this situation. Which brings us into the conversation between Max and Elle, which I really liked, because we see continuation of Max standing her ground, and she very much speaks about not wanting to repeat the cycle of violence, and this is what she did, and the audience didn't need this at all, but nonetheless we get the further reinforcement of her saying that I did not fail to do this, I refuse to do this. But it goes then one step further in her illustrating to Elle is that you think that you are in control of the situation, but you are the one being controlled by this situation. And Elle doesn't argue back, nor does she look wounded by that. So at this particular time, you can say that either Elle has kind of closed herself off from that concept in classic Elle fashion, closing herself off from concepts. She's either done that to the point where she's not going to actually see what Max is talking about, or it's a case where she doesn't know what Max is talking about, but she's not going to acknowledge it. She's going to keep on doing what needs to be done. In a way, this is what I found so interesting about Elle in the season so far. It's like viewing her as domesticated, for lack of a better term. As audience members, because so many elements of Black Sails are intentionally kept ambiguous, you're left to wonder how much of this is her coming to a place of acceptance and her understanding that this is what Nassau needs. Nassau needs me to be fulfilling this role in order to survive, for lack of a better term. Or maybe is this just a means to an end where this feels safe, that she is creating a safe space for herself by occupying this role in which she is subservient to England. She is subservient to whatever male character she's aligned herself with. And that safety is going to be the curtain that hides the very real sense of danger she's in. I have seen the rest of the season, but so I'm not going to allude to what happens there, but just with this episode in and of itself, and of course every other episode of Black Sails that's preceded it, I think that at this particular juncture, it could truly go either way. And then we get the scene of Berenger being none too pleased. He has received the letter on the behalf of Long John Silver, letting them know that 3 of their men are dead, and appealing to the people of Nassau to rise up against the tyranny of English law and join Long John Silver. We get that very impassioned speech of Berenger saying that if anyone wants to stand up to me, now is the time to do so. That actor does a great job. I believe I said it in the reaction. I can't actually quite remember. But I'll reiterate the point anyway, is that for him to play that type of character, it's very, very easy to go down the lines of chewing the scenery because it's such an explosive dynamic. Like, just emotionally, it's all the way up there, especially like vocally with the shouting. That is very, very easy for something like that to just completely fall into farce, or not even farce, but just for it to come across as being empty and just over the top pantominesque. So to see the actor do such a convincing job of delivering those lines, particularly at the end where he's able to pull it back in with the facial expressions, still maintaining the intensity, but still having a level of restraint as well, I thought was very, very strong. From a plot point of view, it's pretty straightforward that the stakes and the tension are as high as they've ever been with a person like Berenger in control. That's not to say that this is as high as they're going to be for the remainder of the episode, but at this point in time, it's safe to say that he is absolutely take no prisoners at this particular junction. So sure enough, as we were talking about with regards to Sylvie fulfilling the role of Long John Silver and for them to be gathering their forces, we get the scene in which, first of all, Flint is recounting that the deal with Billy, it was like, and he tried to kill you? Yep. He tried to kill Maddie as well? Yep. Aren't you angry about it? Yep. That whole thing. It shows that Flint is very much sticking to what he was talking about in 402, is like losing a battle to win a particular war, in that he's buying his time against Billy, because really it's the smartest thing we do. It's something that Billy could learn from, although we understand where Billy's coming from. We got that lovely, lovely scene of Sylvie and Maddie reuniting. I just love the way they look at each other during that sequence. And then we make it clear that we are ready for the fight on Nassau. But so much of it is going to come down to, once more, the role which Long John Silver has to play. That so much of this is going to come down to how the perception of Long John Silver arriving to Nassau is actually going to be the weapon they have, more so than the actual weaponry that they possess. So to see something like this happen is, for us as audience members, even though we haven't even seen it yet, even just to be at this particular juncture, is giving us a great deal of payoff for what has been set up in 310, and indeed so much of Season 3, with the growth of Sylvie into the role of Long John Silver. So in a quick scene before we see the conversation between Elle and Berenger, we have Featherstone speaking with Councilman Fraser, in which he's insisting upon the idea that if there is some leverage given to Max, then it could alleviate a potential revolt, to which the councilman, for obvious reasons, doesn't want to entertain the conversation whatsoever. We understand that this is a means to an end of actually getting the word spread out there, and having Maddie arrive on the scene and Featherstone seeing her definitely instills in him the idea that, they have their backup, that's for sure. And then following this, we do have the conversation between Elle and Berenger, in which he is adamant that he is going to stop at nothing to face the threat of Sylvie and his men head on. Elle is right to chastise him for saying that this is antagonization, to which he is having none of it. And that forces Elle to give him the sheet of paper that will have the routes that the resistance will be taking. What I find interesting at this point is that as an audience, we don't necessarily know whether or not Max's plans that she's written on this piece of paper are or aren't going to be accurate. What matters is that this is a means to an end in which Elle and Max can kind of gain some sort of leverage over Berenger in this particular situation. And again, just like I said previously, it's like seeing Elle stick to the same level of principles that Max herself is trying to stick to is great characterization for both of the girls. So yeah, this scene, wasn't that lovely? Well, what was lovely is that Black Sails, even though it does have its graphic moments, they tend to make them quite short and snappy and to the point, just as a means of exposition, just as a means of serving a function, so that when they are drawn out in a very long sequence such as this one, it feels appropriate that it would do so. And it is appropriate in this sense, because it's not just a case of torture porn. It's not a Passion of the Christ esque exploitation necessarily. What's instead happening here is it does underline the pettiness of a man like Rogers. This whole sequence was preceded with Berenger asking Rogers about his past and asking Rogers about how sure he is of the path forward, and Rogers telling that awful story of how after his brother was killed he murdered 70 men on board a ship, really taking his time with the captain and then leaving one to tell the tale. Just a really awful account, and having that be the precursor to what we're seeing happen with Teach makes so much sense. I think a scene like that was important because even though we've gotten a lot of hints about Roger's dark past, having something told that explicitly to us and hearing his way of telling it, that bit is important. That bit is very, very important, hearing his way of telling that story as a precursor to everything we've seen with Teach makes so much sense that it makes the characterization of Rogers so strong, so strong with this sequence. The emotional weight of the scene itself and what it's doing to Jack, it kind of goes without saying. I mean, you saw my reaction to it, and even in and of itself, you really don't need it. That doesn't need going into. That doesn't require explanation. What I will talk about instead is what that scene means, because we see how the men stand in reverence when they see Teach still alive the third time around, and for Teach to just laugh in Roger's face when his mouth has had its flesh removed to the point of seeing his teeth bared, laughing at Rogers and looking at him. Rogers lost. He was doing so much to show how powerful he was, and he was then defeated by his own lust for power, for his own desire to assert dominance. That was the downfall. That was him putting so much of a spotlight onto himself so that when he fell, everyone could see him fall. Everything that happens in Black Sails is done to underline the theme. It's done to illustrate and then subsequently undermine the characters. Everything that is happening here has a purpose for the storytelling. And yes, of course, it's doing shocking things in order to get those ideas across, but there's a difference between being provocative and being an edgelord. We all know what show I'm talking about with regards to using violence as a means to an end of being a bit of an edgelord. Whereas this was truly provocative. Provocative in the sense that I didn't feel like it was there in some meta way of, oh gee, wait until Twitter hears about this. It was done in a way where it is showing the brutality of this world, and the brutality of these men and what it is that it goes through their heads. It was a fantastic sequence. When I was rewatching it for this review, I made it do the whole scene at double speed, so I didn't have to watch it as much. It's so grisly, but from a storytelling point of view, it's just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So the short scene in which Berenger is sticking to his guns and hanging his men in the square, we learn that he is well aware of Sylvie's arrival, and rather than set an ambush for them, he's letting the fight come here, which is just a great parallel with what was going on in the previous scene with Rogers and what he was, his exercision of control. And regardless of whatever way this succeeding scene is going to go, regardless of what's actually going to happen when Sylvie arrives, it's just like on a personal philosophical level, we see that Berenger has truly been defeated in the same way that Rogers has been defeated by Teach, even though Rogers is alive and Teach isn't. Teach beat Rogers in that moment, and we see that Berenger has in a way already lost he's lost the same battle in a way not dissimilar to Rogers himself. When Elle learns this news, she makes plans to immediately move to the fort. She's being very proactive in that decision. But in and of itself, just seeing those men being hanged by Berenger, who is just so laser focused, just so narrow-minded about him achieving his goals, like, no, let the fight come. It's going to end today, and I'm going to be the man to end it. It's just so great seeing that juxtaposed against what Max had been saying earlier about in the previous episode, talking about how these are men who would rather these are men who fear a war ending more than them actually losing the war itself, by which she means these are men who would rather be within the depths of darkness than to find peace, and those are men that we need to be afraid of. And sure enough, this is that sentiment in full view. And finally, we get that terrific sequence in which, they take back Nassau. They truly take back Nassau, at least for the time being. We see Berenger having truly flown too close to the sun. That not only was he not expecting Nassau itself to rise up against him, but we have Billy and his men come into the fray as well. We get the fantastic sequence of the throat being slit by Hans, and the final shot being the camera moving down, seeing the blood accumulate on Berenger's face and the locket in his hand falling to the ground along with the pool of blood. Man, like, if you were showing this episode to somebody and they had never seen Black Sails before, they would assume that this was just very much an action show. There is just so much violence in this episode. But of course, as aforementioned, like all the violence in the show, it is very much deserved. It's great seeing that standoff. There's so much... Again, so much of what makes Black Sails great is the world that they create. They spend so much time into illustrating the world of Nassau and who the common folk are, and how important the surrounding politics are, so that when you get moments like this, it feels earned. It doesn't feel like, oh yeah, that's where everyone in Nassau has been. We've never actually thought of them. We just assume that they're going along for the ride and they'll help us move the plot along when we need them to. That's absolutely not the case with Black Sails. They make such a concentrated effort to illustrate what Nassau is, who the people of Nassau are, and how they end up coming into the fold to aid us. We see that in a particular way we get something of a resolution of conflict between Billy and Flint. Not really, of course, but just in the sense that both of them are now they're literally in the same place. They have been, despite Billy's arguments, they have been fighting the common enemy. So whether or not Billy likes it, here are both men in the same place, and how that's going to then be dealt with in the coming episodes, we have to wait and see. Or at least you have to wait and see if you haven't seen them yet. I've seen the entire season now at this point, and indeed the series itself, so I know where it's going to go. But from a first-time audience perspective, you are left wondering how that tension is going to be resolved, which is just such a fantastic setup for the succeeding episodes. So overall, this is a fantastic episode of the series. It's a fantastic episode of the season, and another great entry of this series itself. Overall, how I would rank this in comparison to the rest of the episodes from the season, I'm not really sure if I should answer that, because again, if you've never seen Black Sails before and you're just watching these reviews as they come out, I don't want to give anything away, but suffice it to say, that whole sequence with Teach alone is just so strong. It was very, very difficult to look at, very difficult for me to view, but from a storytelling perspective, I do truly appreciate it. I think that it was earned. I didn't get the impression that it was extraneous for the sake of shock value, or again to like be an edgelord or anything like that. It felt very authentically provocative, which is a high compliment to give. It is probably the highest compliment you could give of a 5-minute sequence in which a man is dragged underneath a boat and... oh, Jesus. Okay. So that's pretty much it for my reaction review to Season 4, Episode 3 of Black Sails. I want to thank you so much for taking time to watch this, and If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, then I would like to give you a poem. The poem I'll be leaving you with today is from 1906, Walter de la Mare's The Birth Night. Dearest, it was a night that in its darkness rocked Orion's stars. A sighing wind ran faintly white along the willows, and the cedar boughs laid their wide hands in stealthy peace across the starry silence of their antique moss. No sound save rushing air, cold, yet all sweet with spring, and in thy mother's arms couched weeping there, thou, lovely thing. Thanks for watching.